You're listening to a Roddenberry podcast.
Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast, episode 536, Latent Image.
Welcome into another episode of Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. I'm John Champion.
And I'm Elio Gio, sitting in for Norman Lau. Each week on Mission Log, it's time to examine an episode of Star Trek down to the subatomic level and determine if there are any morals, meanings, and messages in the story. Or if the whole thing just sends us into a devastating emotional feedback loop.
That would be sad. This week, Latent Image, the one where we meet a new crew member and try not to get attached. Meanwhile, Captain Janeway makes sure the Doctor's iCloud backup is not paid in full. Elio, welcome to Mission Log. It is a pleasure to see you, a pleasure to work with you. Please, for our audience who may not know who you are, give us a quick recap.
Yeah, so my name is Elio, the podcaster formerly known as Elijah, and I was the executive producer and co-host on Priority One, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast.
Yes, part of the family, yeah.
That's right. And back in the day, we used to produce a weekly show that covered all the news of the week that came from the greater Star Trek franchise and specifically Star Trek Online. But I got to tell you, John, it's good to talk with you here again. It's good to be on and use the microphone. And more importantly, it's an honor for me to be here and do a show with you here.
Well, thanks, man. Always a pleasure hanging out with you and talking podcasting and Star Trek and all the places where our lives kind of overlapped and our interests were common. So as I've told people on Mission Log, while Norman is taking some personal time off, it is my pleasure to be able to bring some interesting and new voices to Mission Log. And you are one who we definitely knew we wanted to have on, so glad to have you here. And if you would do the honors and remind our audience how to reach us.
Well, you see, that's important because Mission Log is a conversation about Star Trek. So you can find the show at missionlog@roddenberry.com and on X and Facebook at Mission Log Pod. And while you're at it, leave a review and a rating at Apple Podcasts or whatever your favorite podcast platform might be, because it makes a big difference to the podcast that you have come to love. And remember, your comments can be used on Mission Log or engage on the Roddenberry YouTube channel. The Roddenberry Industrial Complex will not be denied.
Okay, I have to admit, I left that in there. Adam from Greatest Gen wrote that line, and I just thought, it's too good to give up.
Yeah. I hope I did it justice.
You did. Good job.
And now here's John with this week's trivia.
All right, let's get into it for Latent Image. We have a story by Ellen Connors, Brannon Braga, and Joe Menosky. But I love a story like this. Ellen was but an intern on Voyager when she pitched an idea that would involve the Doctor's holo imager. She's probably like me. She saw that prop and she was like, ooh, you know what? This is build a whole story around that. Yeah. So Brannon and Joe liked the idea as a starting point and then took it and ran with it. And since Voyager, Ellen has added a few credits to her resume with short films in particular. Now we have a teleplay by Joe Menosky, and here's where things get a little dicey. Joe had written the bulk of the script, but the ending didn't seem to quite come together in Brannon's opinion, so he rewrote it. Or at least he restructured the dialogue of that scene, all the words that Joe had already written. And that was much to the surprise of Joe, as well as his actors, Kate Mulgrew and Bob Picardo. They weren't all thrilled with the changes, but even so, they hold this episode in relatively high regard for the depths that it afforded them as actors. And, Elio, we might be able to speak to our opinions about that final scene as we get through our discussion of the episode.
Absolutely. You know what, before you continue, is that original script available anywhere?
Ooh, you know what? I will have to check in the archive and see if we have that version. A lot of our Voyager stuff was donated by Mike and Denise and Larry and Janet Nemechek and people who worked a little later in the series, because, of course, that was after Gene had passed away. We might be able to get our hands on that. So nice. I will do some digging. This was directed by Mike Vehar, and we're still pretty early in Mike's run of episodes on Voyager. Now, at the same time, he was bouncing around over to DS9 to direct a few over there, too. And the only Voyager outing of his so far that we have covered is Year of Hell Part 2. And let's meet our guest stars. Well, welcome back to Scarlett Palmer's as Naomi Wildman. And I have to admit that we haven't really mentioned one of Voyager's repeat players, and that is Tarek Ergin until now. But we see him often, ever since Caretaker, as crewman Ayala, who served with Chakotay in the Maquis. And he's here in that familiar look, of course, but he is also the actor under the alien makeup as the unknown assailant who attacks Kim and Chital. Finally, Nancy Bell plays Chital, the ensign that you know and love from 18 months ago, who you also just met. Most of Nancy's credits are in the 90s with TV guest appearances. More recently, she had a recurring role on The Bold and the Beautiful, and in 2005, she co-wrote and starred in the film Loudmouth Soup. And so far, this is her only Trek appearance, and, well, certainly the only one for Chital.
Hey you, welcome to the Delta Quadrant. I never forget a face. Your ensign walks her bucket, aren't you?
Prologue. The Doctor is making rounds, doing annual checkups on the crew. He's using his holo-imager to take incredibly detailed images all the way down to the subatomic level. There's a surprise in one of those images, though, when he scans Harry Kim and notices some scarring at the base of his skull. It's the kind of scar that could only come from a neurosurgical procedure that the Doctor himself developed. The catch? The Doctor has no memory of performing the surgery, and Harry doesn't remember having one. Act 1. The Doctor visits Captain Janeway in her ready room for her physical exam since, as usual, she's playing hooky. He asks her to come to sickbay for a body scan and mentions the mysterious surgery on Harry. He deduces that it happened about 18 months ago based on the isotope decay around the scars, but Janeway, well, she doesn't remember a thing either. Janeway suggests a diagnostic on the Doctor's program, but Torres and Kim are both busy, so the Doctor goes to the astrometrics lab to seek help from 7 of 9. She's busy, too, recalibrating the deflector dish, but she agrees to help in an hour. So an hour later, 7 finds the Doctor inactive in sickbay. She activates him and informs him that his suspicions were correct. But the Doctor has no memory of their conversation. He tries to access Harry's scans, only to find that the files have been deleted. Determined, the Doctor asks 7 to meet him in Holodeck 2 to check his holo-images from 18 months ago. In the holodeck, they find that all images from the surgery date are missing from his imager, but 7 manages to reconstruct a few of them, a birthday party for an ensign and a shuttle mention with that ensign and Harry Kim, only the Doctor doesn't recognize the ensign at all. Act 2. 7 discovers that the Doctor's memory files from Stardate 50979 are still there, but his program has been altered to block access. She restores them, but the memories come back out of order. The Doctor recalls attending the unknown ensign's birthday party, a shuttle mission with her and Kim, an attack by an unknown alien, and performing surgery on the 2 of them with Tom Paris in sickbay. Not necessarily in that order. In a briefing with Janeway and Tuvok, they can't identify the alien who attacked the shuttle. The species is even unknown to the Borg. Tuvok suggests that the images might be manipulated, but the Doctor thinks the crew's memories were erased after an attack by this unknown alien. He believes Ensign Ani Jatal, the mystery ensign, could be an alien intruder. Janeway orders a security sweep and sensor recalibration to detect any cloaked ships. The Doctor heads to sickbay to deactivate himself for safety, but first he sets up some precautions. He duplicates his recent memory files and programs the computer to reactivate them if any tampering occurs. He also sets his holo-imager to take photos every 5 seconds if anyone enters the room. With the trap set, he deactivates himself. Soon enough, someone enters sickbay and deletes his recent memory files, unaware of the holo-imager capturing everything. The computer reactivates the Doctor, who quickly identifies the culprit, Captain Janeway. Act 3. The doctor storms onto the bridge, accusing the crew of conspiring against him. In the ready room, Janeway explains she blocked his memories to prevent a programming conflict. The doctor feels violated, but Janeway insists it was necessary. She orders him back to sickbay. There, Chakotay asks for copies of the doctor's memory files for Torres and Seven to rewrite his program. Paris will cover for the doctor while he's offline. The doctor questions Paris, who actually backs Janeway's decision. Late that night, Seven confronts Janeway in her quarters about the doctor's individuality. Janeway dismisses her concerns, but Seven argues that treating the doctor like a replicator, like a machine, undermines his rights. Seven points out that as a Borg, she too is part machine and could face similar treatment. She leaves, forcing Janeway to consider her actions. Janeway then goes to the doctor and offers to show him what happened 18 months ago. Act 4, time for a flashback into the doctor's memories. He recalls the surprise birthday party for Ensign Chital and the shuttle mission with her and Kim, and during the mission, an alien attacks, causing both Kim and Chital to go into synaptic shock in sickbay later. The doctor has to choose between saving Kim or Chital, as there's only time to save one. He chooses Kim, who survives, but Chital dies. The doctor is overwhelmed with grief as Chital flatlines. Act 5. After Chital's funeral, the doctor is in the mess hall and obsesses over his decision. Neelix calls security when the doctor lashes out. Janeway explains that the doctor developed a feedback loop, unable to reconcile his choice. The only solution was erasing his memories of Chital. The doctor, ruminating again, admits that he chose Kim because he was his friend. As he becomes frantic, Janeway deactivates him. She wonders if reprogramming him was wrong and questions their right to override his evolving personality. Janeway visits Seven in the cargo bay and asks if regaining her individuality was worth the pain. Seven affirms, despite the struggles, she wouldn't change it. So now the doctor has become their patient. The crew maintains a vigil, hoping he recovers. On the holodeck, Janeway reads as the doctor stares blankly, lost in thought. He eventually speaks, contemplating predetermination. Tuvok comes in and offers to relieve Janeway, but she declines, even though she's been there for 16 hours and is clearly drained. The doctor asks about the book she's reading, La Vita Nuova, and Janeway says it's 1,000 years old but still relevant. The doctor scoffs at the title, meaning the new life, but then he notices Janeway's headache. He insists that she go to sickbay, but she insists that she's helping a friend and will go later. The doctor reassures her, and as she falls asleep, he starts reading. In that book, which is my memory, on the first page of the chapter that is the day when I first met you, appear the words, "Here begins a new life." The end.
You know, this episode is fun to watch in 2024. Mm-hmm. Because remember, this aired back in 1999.
Whoa.
Right? And the idea that there will be technology that will allow you to be scanned and then digitally replicated.
Yeah.
Right? It's really not science fiction anymore.
No, I remember way back in the day on Mission Log making fun of, that Blade Runner thing where there's a picture, but there's something around the corner, and all Decker has to do is to say enhance.
Right,
and it does. Right. And you're like, that's not real.
Yeah,
you can't do that. Yeah.
But, I'm talking about, this type of technology is being applied in medicine today in one way, shape, or form. Whether you've got, Microsoft HoloLens that will allow doctors to train in a virtual environment on a 3D skeleton or anatomically correct structure.
Yeah.
Now, we may not be able to scan at the subatomic level yet. But, you go from MRI, convert that to 3D, put your VR headset on, and, practice on... in VR. And not only that, but we can do it now on our phones.
Yeah.
Right.
See, okay. That's what's wild because I love I love the Holo Imager prop anyway, and we kind of make fun of it and say, oh, it's huge, it's clunky, and the guy's just walking around taking pictures. Come on, everybody, we all are surrounded by cameras now anyway, so why is this a thing? But now they added something really 24th century to it, which I love. But then I thought, well, wait a minute, the phone that is right here in front of me is a thing that also takes 3D videos now and just stuff that was unthinkable even a couple of years ago on that scale.
Yeah. Have your iPhone 15 spatial video and then throw your Vision Pros on for the three of you that still have it, and boom, you've got.
And you're set. You're set. One thing I really like, I like that we have an interesting setup right away with Harry. And I hate to skip ahead, but I have to say that on the rewatch, it's cool to try to figure out who knows what. Yeah. You know, and because right away, Harry's like, that's why I don't remember having cranial surgery.
Right.
Wink, wink.
Was he in on it? What?
Yeah, right. Yeah. All right. So some interesting lines here. The Doctor sees Seven as a prized pupil. Interesting for him to say that. I wonder, like, does she see herself that way, or does she see something?
I doubt it.
I don't think so either.
I think it's the opposite. I think he's the lower life form.
Yeah, right. I think you're right. Interesting note here about the residual photons in the holobuffer, because now we know that Seven is an expert at file recovery, so you don't have to call drive savers. That's expensive. We don't have to deal with them.
Bro, Astrometrics is just the basement where IT is at.
It is.
Okay?
It is.
I live there. I get it.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Now, I really... I like how they do this in the episode, which is introduce a character who's only going to be here for one episode, but you have to have a character who's one of our main, admit, I don't remember her, you know? Yeah. Because it's all about the memory wipe. And I like, I hate it when a show will try to get away with that, oh, don't you remember this? And it never happened. But if you're...
Can I put you on the spot, and can you compare it to another episode of Trek that sticks out in your mind as having done it?
Far be it from us to break the timeline. I am so sorry, but we're about to do it. Red alert, the cyborg, and they just decided, we had already seen the character, but then they decided to create the backstory right before, we're not going to spoil it, but they just decided to suddenly create the backstory so they could tell the rest of that episode.
Wait,
story.
which series?
Sorry, Discovery.
Discovery. Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah. See?
Yes.
See?
Yes.
And in the moment, I think, okay, they got away with some stuff there, and I think they at least sold some of it. But, man, how much more of an impact would that have had if we had gotten...
Bro, I didn't remember her name.
Right.
I had to ask you.
See?
Because I was like, wait,
go.
Voyager? Wait,
sorry.
I didn't know. I wasn't trying to put you on the spot there. I literally didn't know what you were talking about. And I was, and then you said, I know what you're talking about.
There you go. Yeah. So that's the kind of I feel like you can get away with it in this, although it's a good bit of acting then to expect out of everybody on Voyager's crew, because Chital had friends. There are logs about her, surely, and anybody might slip up around the Doctor like, oh, wow, I really miss Chital. I mean, forget what I said and run out the door.
Right. I love watching Trek now without feeling pressured, because I can catch little things. Like Robert Picardo is playing with the little reflex. I forget what that's called. What the doctors used to test your reflexes with.
Yeah, the little hammer. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, little hammer. Yeah. And right at the end of the scene, he said Janeway dismisses him, and he's got it upright, and then he just let it slides down.
Yeah.
Like, phew, and it's just like little things like that you don't normally catch on the first watch, maybe second watch, maybe third watch, but you're gonna catch it on the fourth, fifth, or 12th watch.
Yes.
And it's but it adds a little bit to the character, and sometimes the character can be a little much.
A little abrasive.
A
sure.
bit abrasive.
Yeah,
a bit
over
abrasive.
the top. Yeah.
Now, I'm sure we're going to dive into this a little more, but if you talking about watching this episode for the first time, right? You might first think that this is a story about immediately prejudice and discrimination and individuality, right? Is the Doctor alive? Is he a toaster?
Yeah.
And this scene, right, with Janeway sort of sets that up because she's so dismissive of the Doctor. And we just continue to see that later on, right? We'll talk about that more.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, a little bit of a return to season 1 Janeway, which is interesting. Yeah. So every now and then we talk about the Doctor not having a backup, or maybe having a backup, or maybe pieces of him backed up. This episode plays fast and loose with that anyway. Like, he can create his own duplicate file if he wants to. But I wondered
he can look at his own file?
Right.
Like, imagine looking at the neuron that the memory lives on.
Yes. See, exactly. And that's such a weird thing because, the Doctor is a construct, is a human-made construct of ones and zeros and digital data, right? But then it seems like his memory almost works like an organic brain in some sense because he's just getting pieces that are not linear, and they're not... They lack context, so he's got to wait and figure it out the way that a human brain does. No, yeah, you're pointing at me.
I'm pointing because do you remember there was a time when we all had to defrag our hard drives?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so that's what's going on with him. Yeah.
Perhaps I don't know. It just everything's fragmented, and as you're defragging, you're moving things. I don't.
But see, that's what's so interesting, is that it raises this question about how much of the Doctor's experience is actually committed to memory.
Right.
Because there might be a program that says, you know what, all this time that you were just sitting around doing nothing, we're just going to remove that.
As opposed to Data, who records everything.
Everything all the time. Yeah,
right.
Yeah, it is kind of wild. Clever bit of detective work on his part, though. Okay, I'm going to create a duplicate of this segment, then I'm going to go offline, and then I'm going to compare the duplicate to what was erased. That's all very clever, well done. And I love the reflected shot of the door opening in the computer monitor. Now, when the camera goes off, it makes a lot of noise, a lot of indicator lights.
Yeah. Again, it pulls us out.
Yeah. Anybody walking in would notice that because, again, we got cameras that are the size of a pea now. You could put anywhere and, be able to hide it.
I'm with you there about the shot of the doors.
Yeah.
Opening, reflecting on the console, right?
Yeah.
Because I enjoy, and again, after rewatching these episodes, years later, it's fun to pay attention to the directors.
Yes.
And how they get creative.
Yeah.
Right? Because there are some directors that, essentially point and shoot. There are, 3 or 4 cameras on set, maybe zoom in, blah, blah, blah. But then there are directors that get creative.
Yeah. And
this is one of those episodes, right? We had a Star Trek episode that I think without this, the creativity of putting us in the first person perspective, playing with the cinematography, I think that this episode might not land as well as it does. But that's great, that the way that they use that camera is subtle, but it really changes the feel of an episode.
Yeah.
We had that happen again as he's regaining his memories, right? The camera pans into his eye a little bit like the image I get is Locutus as for those of you painting the picture at home. I'm not saying it's supposed to be Locutus, but we get that half profile and then the memory program in the background behind him also in focus.
Yeah.
So, again, getting creative in 1999 on a syndicated series, I think is really fun to look out for these things.
And, essentially for a bottle show. Because we all know that Voyager's budget was lower and lower and lower and lower.
Right.
But here you just need a guest star. Yeah. And then you kind of do everything with the existing sets and really build dramatic tension, So I thought they handled that very well.
I want to go back a little bit to the whole data and memory and hard drive space thing, because there is a bit of a plot hole, and you mentioned it a little bit earlier. It's like he saw Jatal, right? And he says, who is this person? There is no way that they wiped her from all the data banks.
Thank
There's
you.
no way that he didn't say, hey, Boober.
Yeah.
do a reverse image search of this person.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because, but now hold on a second. Because I say that because we're in 2024.
Yeah.
And we have that stuff now.
Yeah.
Right? That we can do a reverse image search, on Google.
Yeah.
But back then, not so much. So this is, I'm sure we'll talk about this later. Does this episode hold up? In some ways, but not this way. not when it comes to the technology.
I think you're right. Yeah. No, but that's a really interesting point. They probably could have resolved that with a bit of dialogue to say that, the Doctor does not have access to certain files anyway, but like a crew manifest, just to be able to know how many people were here when we started. And
what's going to happen when they get home?
I know.
Like, we can't talk about Jatal because of the Doctor.
Yeah,
Don't
yeah.
mention Jatal. Who was Jatal?
The Doctor's in the room. No, nobody talk. I love finding out that Tuvok and Janeway and Chakotay are sumo wrestling fans. That's just a cool, we should have had more of that all along. Love that kind of banter. And oh man, when the Doctor comes in and he's just so outraged and his et tu Tuvok. Wonderful.
Dramatic.
And I love Tuvok's seriousness in that scene. He's great. Always love a good Janeway challenge scene when she puts somebody in her place and in their place, and she just exudes power. So good like that.
But you see, here is that dialogue and that conversation that happens again, right? This argument that she starts to have with him. Is she violating his individuality? Right?
Well,
what's shocking to me is how cold she is about the entire situation with him, right? How it's a calculation for her. And so was she in the right? Did she violate the autonomy of a sentient being, not just as the commanding officer, but is she dismissing the Doctor's sentience, right? Does she still think of him as just a souped up chat GPT?
Elio, let me introduce you to my friend named Tuvix.
Yeah,
and,
right. Yes. Yes.
And that
she's
may,
quick.
yeah. So, I don't know how much time she spent kicking that around. Probably not a lot. And then, cut to some really. Okay, I'll tie it back to Tuvix again. Think about that scene where she's ushering him off the bridge, and nobody speaks up for him, right? Intense stuff. Okay, cut to this scene in our episode today where Chakotay, Seven, and Tom Paris are all there in sickbay, figuratively pinning down the Doctor before just assuming, here's what we're going to do. We're going to wipe your memory, and that's that, and we all agree because the captain is right. I mean, it's shades of Tuvix. To me, it was also shades of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. It was just here's the thing, we're going to scramble your brain, and that's how it goes.
You know what I like about the scene is Paris asks him, what projects he's got going.
You're working on some cellular thing, yeah.
No, it's Diomedian Scarlet Moss. That's what the Doctor's got going.
Okay.
That's what it is. It's
Good.
from TNG. Yeah, nice callback.
Oh, okay. We're going to put that on a trivia sheet. That'll.
No, it's not. No, man. I'm making a joke. It's a TNG joke. It's from. Good grief! Of course, I'm going to make the joke, and now I forget the name of the episode.
No.
But it's Beverly Crusher's growing the moss, and then it's the time loop episode.
Oh my God! Okay,
and Data's the only one who remembers.
900 listeners are already yelling.
I know they're all yelling at me.
Yeah. So
I have to excuse myself from the show. Excuse me.
That's fine because it will be on a trivia sheet one day. That will show up, and then you all will know it.
I want to add to this though. Yeah. So I hear what you're saying about Tuvix, right? None of the other crew members showed up.
Yeah.
But we have this moment, aside from Paris asking what the projects are, we have this moment between the Doctor and Paris where Paris is where the Doctor is shocked, turns to Paris and says, "You too? You agree with this?" And Paris says, "Yeah, it was bad, dude. You were bad."
Yeah.
And so this is where. Now, I've never served in the military, and I will never presume to put myself in the position. So for those of you who are and have served in the military, this might be a question for you, right? Is if the members of your group, if something like this happened to you, but the members of your group told you that, no, what we did for you was the best, do you just believe them and say, all right, well, my brothers and sisters in arms have said that they needed to do this to me. I'm going to trust them, right? Because they form bonds that are about life and death. And I would imagine that serving on a vessel like this in the middle of nowhere, those bonds are also formed. So if you have somebody turn to you with a straight face, look at you and say, "No, this was for the better." I don't know, man. I might start thinking to myself, maybe I'm going to think twice about having these memories back in my head.
And if we hadn't done it, you would endanger us all. That's the other. Yeah. Okay. Save that thought, because I think we'll come back to it in the next segment for sure. Really strong acting moments throughout. I love this scene with Seven confronting Janeway. First of all, just walking in at 2:00 in the morning into her quarters, say, "We need to talk about this." It's such a moody scene. You were talking about the availability of tools at a director's disposal to craft a scene, and I think everything in that is played well. It's the lighting, it's the music, and then Janeway's just weird decision to compare the EMH to a replicator. I mean, again, back to season 1 Janeway. Yeah.
So at the end of that scene, Seven poses a question to Janeway, right? If I started malfunctioning, would you do a similar thing? And I'm not quoting correctly here.
Yeah.
Do you think did that seem like a stretch to you to ask that question?
Well,
is it accurate for her to compare herself to the Doctor?
You know what? I think there's two things at play here. One, I think we can chalk part of this up to Seven's kind of special relationship with the Doctor. Like, these are two people who actually kind of they get each other. They understand each other in this weird way, because Seven has had a lot of trouble connecting to the purely organic members of the crew, Yeah. But I'm also going to bring back an old-time mission log phrase that is in our glossary on missionlogpodcast.com, and that is carbon chauvinism. And I think Janeway is expressing a bit of that here in the old Captain Kirk tradition. That, I'm going to hold you, 7 of 9, in a little higher regard, because you are naturally occurring. Right. Even outside of what happened to you with the Borg. I mean, you're made of, flesh and blood and bone, and even though you have these nanoprobes in you, we've gotten you to step away from your desire to rejoin the collective. But the Doctor is just whatever we program him to be.
Right.
And that's you have to wonder if Janeway's attitude will change at all at this point.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I love the cake that Tuvok is holding for Chital. We have a space cake on deck. Glad to see that. I love how the Doctor is so very 2024 that they're under attack, but he's taking pictures of it all.
Look, man. I've been there.
Yeah.
It was my first ever trip outside of the United States. I went to China, and I was just taking pictures of so much so that one of my friends was like, "Yo, can you stop taking pictures?" But I didn't care. Yeah. It was my first time out of the United States. I was in Beijing. I was like the Doctor. Yeah. And I could see why, right? Because he just got the emitter, right?
Yeah.
So this is his first time going out and about. But this also goes back to your question: how does he remember things? Right? Yeah. Why does he need the holo emitter to remember these things? Shouldn't he be scanning and recording everything?
Look, do it for the gram. Okay,
do it for the gram.
That's what the Doctor's doing. Love the makeup effects on Kim.
John, it's TikTok now, John.
Oh, guys, I'm so 2018. Good makeup effects on Kim and Chital. Both those are really done. Little scary when the Doctor says, "Okay, we need to isolate the spinal cord from the brainstem." That's
a shunt.
Terrifying.
That's a hard word. That's a rough word.
Yeah, that is terrifying. Thank you very much. Really like Harry rocking the casual vest, though.
Right?
That's good to see. Yeah.
We finally see that he has to make that decision, right? He has to make the decision. Hold on, I should think about. Speaking of Harry and his casual vest, he may not be so casual for long, because we see the final memory, right, where the Doctor has to make a decision. And I'm thinking to myself, well, of course he's going to pick Harry. Harry's a bridge officer, right? Yeah. Even though he's an ensign, he's still a bridge officer, and he's serving on the bridge. So I would imagine that serving in a hierarchical structure, he would have to make the choice, I need to save the bridge officer. Not to sound insensitive, as he says, not to sound insensitive, but, there's a certain level of professionalism that he has.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just, we'll get more into this, but this is moments where the plot for me starts to lose some cohesion.
Okay.
In terms of what we are supposed to be worrying about.
Okay, interesting. We will hold that thought. As we wrap it up, just want to point out a few key scenes. The funeral scene, really nice, understated, definitely shades of The Wrath of Khan. Anybody's paying attention to the dialogue there. And of course, just the imagery of the photon torpedo, really nice. That scene in the mess hall, I mean, just a great performance. That Bob Picardo, he can play really over the top, but he really gave it build here to the blow up. And he's magnificent in it. And then I think to counter that in a really nice way, Janeway is given all these moments of quiet contemplation, like just dead serious quiet contemplation throughout the final act here. And I love that we balance that out with having her really underplay that stuff, because Picardo as the Doctor is really just at a boiling point, No,
I agree. I think Robert Picardo did excellent with his crescendos, his decrescendos, balancing, giving us a roller coaster of emotions while he is in the moment working these thoughts out. And you're right, he can, of course, he could be, the opera singer over the top, as, we learn more about the Doctor. But, again, between his performance and directing, that was an incredible scene. Yeah. So it's here where I start to think that we begin to deviate and explore other themes for the episode. Is it about the rights of an individual, or is the story about something more personal?
I think that is an excellent place to maybe continue this conversation in the next segment, so we'll pick it up there.
I am all for Harry showing more spine, but not like this. No, not like this.
We'll get right back to Latent Image after a word from this week's sponsor. Folks, I want to take a moment to share some exciting news about Green Chef, the #1 meal kit for eating well. Now, if you're looking to up your clean eating game this summer, Green Chef is the way to go. They're all about delivering pre-portioned, quality, whole foods right to your door. Think of it as your personal farmer's market without the hassle of actually having to go to one.
That's right. Green Chef is the first certified organic meal kit company, and they bring the freshest seasonal produce along with responsibly sourced proteins like antibiotic and hormone-free chicken and sustainably sourced seafood. It's like having a chef in your kitchen guiding you through every meal.
Isn't that nice of them to do that, a chef guiding you? And let's be honest, in the busy world we live in, convenience is key. Green Chef makes it super easy with their pre-measured and prepped ingredients. That's what I love, is not wasting stuff. And you can whip up a restaurant-worthy meal in no time. Plus, they have over 80 weekly menu and market options, so there's always something new to try. And I will speak here from experience for just a moment. I was so happy with one of the steak dishes that they sent. Very impressive. Just kind of whip that up in about 20, 25 minutes and have this really lovely meal. Also, I'm not a vegetarian, but I really enjoyed one of their vegetarian dishes that was a chickpea salad sandwich. And it was, that sounds simple. It was knockout. It was so good. So I definitely have appreciated the quality of what I've gotten from Green Chef.
It's sometimes simple is the best.
Exactly.
Whether you're into Mediterranean, plant-based, gluten-free, or keto diets, Green Chef has got you covered. Their rotating options make sure you never get bored with your meals. And if you're like me, always trying to maintain a healthy lifestyle, you'll love their gut and brain health recipes filled with fiber, antioxidants, and omega-3s.
I feel healthier just hearing you say that. And did you know that Green Chef is owned by HelloFresh? Yes, now we've had HelloFresh on before as a sponsor, and it's true with both brands. You get an amazing variety of meal plans to choose from, and I really love switching between them. It's very convenient to get that ultimate variety, and now our listeners can enjoy both brands at a discount with us.
Just go to greenchef.com/missionlog50 and use code missionlog50 to get 50% off plus 20% off your next 2 months. Green Chef really is the #1 meal kit for eating well.
Don't forget, that's greenchef.com/missionlog50 with the code missionlog50 for that amazing offer. So look, give your replicator a break and try the #1 meal kit for eating well. So, Elio, I want to pick up with something that you were getting into at the end of the last segment, because here's where we really kind of, decompress and pick apart some of these threads, some of these ideas. You brought up something that I thought was part of the strength of this episode, which is you watch it one way and you think it's about one thing. And you think like, oh, okay, this is about medical ethics. And you go, did the doctor make the right decision? And, to me, it's a bit of just a trolley program, but expanded out a bit. So picture this. Okay, you're a doctor. You've got 2 patients. They're both in terrible shape. They both need attention, but you can only save one. Okay. So if you don't know them, you just might make a decision based on other medical criteria. Is one younger or older? Is one in slightly worse shape or better? All these kinds of things that just make snap judgments. Okay, but then change it a bit. One is your child. Okay, but maybe one has a terminal condition. And maybe one is a coworker or a medical genius who can save others. There's no good answer to this. It just comes down to, what we call on the Kobayashi Maru a test of character. It's just a thing to go through, and then you have to work through the consequences. And I think that is certainly the catalyst for what happens here. But I think what you were getting at is a really interesting other way, probably a more important way to look at this episode, and that is about the Doctor's growth.
Right. So when you first watch this episode, yes, you might think that this is a story about medical ethics. You might think that this is a story about individualism. What makes me alive? What makes the Doctor alive? But then I was watching it with Allison, and she brought up a really good point. Could it be about memory? Mm-hmm. The importance of memory. And that it's important for us, and we had a great conversation about it. Is it important for us? We often think of ourselves, gee, I wish I could forget that moment. Right?
Yeah.
This moment was so painful, so traumatic. I wish I could forget it.
Yeah.
Here, we have a doctor who happens to be a hologram who had that happen to. And because of his programming, because of the type of life form that he is, struggled with that question.
Yeah.
That question that you were posing before. Who was right to save? And you could watch this episode and go, well, Harry, of course, right? If you're a medical doctor, I'd imagine you'd look at this episode and go, have your own opinion, right? You would make your own decision in that moment.
Yeah.
But that's not what's wrong with the Doctor. What's wrong with the Doctor is that he was a program that they have added personality subroutines to.
Yeah.
They have been little by little adding to the programming language that makes the Doctor.
And arguably, those have been growing on their own. He made the decision to create a holographic family. He made the decision to study other areas of interest,
Right.
Yeah.
So in this moment, he is experiencing a traumatic moment that is having him spiral in what is a feedback loop. That feedback loop is a result of the programming, right? Is that he wasn't intended to be alive. So if you look at the episode again now and try to pull a moral out of it, right? Yeah. It's that our memories make us who we are, right? That trauma is what makes us who we are. And I think of like a movie like Eternal Sunshine of a Spotless Mind.
Yeah.
Right? That whole movie is about erasing somebody from your mind because the heartbreak was so bad.
Yeah.
But does that hurt you as an individual, or does it make you better? Are we forged by our struggles? or aren't
Right.
we?
Well,
so does the Doctor need to go through this? And that's what happens, right? And this is where I was mentioning earlier that I feel like the plot gets it loses this a little bit. It could have landed, could have been a perfect landing.
Yeah.
But Janeway is still so like, darn this toaster. Why do I have to be here for 16 hours? That we lose sight of the fact of the struggle that she's trying to allow him to experience.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Of coming to the conclusion that this is life.
Yeah.
And I, as a life form, need to live this life.
You referenced a great movie, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. I'm going to reference another great movie, Star Trek V, The Final Frontier. Because Kirk, Captain at that point, Captain Kirk says, I need my pain. And it's not about I need to struggle. It's about I need to have the totality of experiences in order to understand the difference between one state of being and another. I need to have that in order to make good ethical choices. And all of those things are what add up to make me me. I wished, like you, I wish we had stuck the landing to get there with this being part of the decision that Janeway makes. I mean, I think we can kind of infer it from where she goes between Act 3 and Act 5, you know, from treating him like a toaster to showing some empathy and deciding, well, we're gonna see how this plays out. But there was a part of me, like in the back of my mind, I thought, okay, well, she's just doing the next possible step on the flowchart. Yeah. You know, we tried this thing. It's too difficult to hide our tracks. So now we just see what happens here. And I guess if all else fails, we just start over, we reboot the program and we see what happens. So I don't really, I don't feel the emotional connection there necessarily, the way that Tom probably would, or Harry, or Seven.
Oh, that's a good point.
You know, like imagine if Seven had been in the room there with it, you know, to give us that moment.
She would have been excellent because she didn't have a human upbringing the way other humans did, right? She was assimilated at a very young age.
Right.
So her experience with trauma, her experience with memories also would suffer a little bit. And I'm sure she will struggle, she has struggled with thinking back on these things. And that could have been a very touching moment to see Seven go, I've done some incredibly horrible things.
Yeah.
And I have to live with them.
Yeah.
You didn't do anything horrible, but it was a very traumatic choice.
Oh, man.
Let's work this through together.
We just ended up in a place that some of our listeners resent, which is we put on our writer's hats. And we were like, what if they had made this choice in the episode instead of this other? But I think that's really, it's a really thoughtful way to look at the emotional reality here, especially because I don't know that we're necessarily sold on Janeway and where she ends up in the episode, you know?
We needed one more act.
Yeah. You really did.
That's it.
Okay.
Just one more act.
Well, let me turn this around then and ask this, because you talked a little bit earlier about asking, okay, say we're in a situation, you're in a more heightened military situation, somebody is walking around with this mental trauma, this experience, whatever, and they literally can't do the job, or worse, they would endanger other people if they still are walking around with that, okay? So Janeway's still the captain. Now, Janeway's not God. Janeway doesn't have the power of a king. She can't just do things and there are no repercussions. But does she have the right? You know, and I guess legally, structurally, you could say, okay, this is a tool on board Voyager. Just as she says, like a replicator, like anything else. You know, Janeway can take away holodeck privileges from everybody. Janeway could say, you know what, Tom, you can no longer go into your stupid 1960s garage because you're neglecting B'Elanna every time you do that. Like, she could make decisions like that and just say, I'm going to dole out technology the way I see fit. And this, she could make the argument to say the EMH is an enormously important part of the functioning of this ship. So if it's not working perfectly, we have to do everything we can to fix it. So I guess you can say that ultimately she can make that decision for him. However, may I refer you back to part of Star Trek's credo, which is to seek out new life. Right. And I think we can very easily make the argument that the Doctor, the EMH, is new life that they have nurtured, that they have coaxed along. And that's really Seven's argument here about him exceeding programming. So
I'm gonna get I'm gonna get really personal. I'm gonna switch this off because we've been thinking about military, and I haven't been in the military.
Yeah, neither have I.
Have you? Yeah. All right, so let me try to. Mm-hmm. I want to think about something that I can relate to a little more closely with this, and it's Alzheimer's. Mm-hmm. You know, I've watched both my grandparents. Mm-hmm. One of them has already passed, and one of them is being taken care of in a facility. Both of them I've lost to Alzheimer's and frontal temporal dementia.
Yeah.
I think a lot about memory.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's a genetic thing, you know. And so this goes to what I was mentioning earlier about Paris, right? He turns to Paris, somebody he trusts, and he asks him, do you believe this is right? And Paris says yes. Now, compound that with the fact that they're family. They're not just coworkers. They really are. They're living together in this ship.
Yeah.
Right? So they're a little beyond just colleagues at this point. Mm-hmm. I would imagine that should I get to a point where I'm forgetting things, that I'm going to need to trust my friends.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
If I do something and they say, no, you can't do that, at some point I'm going to need to trust that they have my well-being in mind.
Mm-hmm.
Shouldn't the Doctor have? As colleagues on that ship, as family on that ship?
Should he put more trust into them?
Into some, yes, into like, especially into like Tom, or let's say Harry, right? Shouldn't he put his trust in them more, especially not Janeway, because Janeway like talks to him like a toaster, but like but Paris,
Yeah, I guess he's had the most experience with Paris. Like, they've actually worked together. But the thing is, if he kind of goes down the line of, well, who are the people that I'm connected to on this ship? Again, we come back to Seven as being the really critical factor here, because Seven will tell him exactly what she thinks, which is, you are being treated in this way because Janeway can't see that you have grown beyond your programming. So, maybe he gets the right, quote-unquote, right answer from Tom or from Harry or maybe even B'Elanna. But then he would presumably get this really personal, kind of much more philosophical answer from Seven. I think there's still kind of a semi-argument to be made here. Like, thank you for sharing that story about your family, because I know
of course
exactly what that's like, and I think not something that is quite that serious and quite that permanent, but I think back to other times, and my dad was a doctor, and there were no secrets or things that he wasn't comfortable talking about, but I also know that there are times in our family and kind of extended family where maybe it's okay to not volunteer all the information.
Yeah. Yes. Right.
Because, and in the simplest way, you can say, okay, well, I don't want you to worry, or I didn't want someone else to worry. And you might feel like, okay, but I'm going to do that anyway. Mm-hmm. Well, but if it comes down to the point of, we just need to get this thing done.
Yeah. Right.
And it will be okay. Or as okay, and there's nothing that you could do anyway. Like, is it all right to hold on to that? Maybe it's not so little, but that lie.
Yeah.
Because there's a bigger picture here, and I don't know how you explain that to somebody who has had their memory wiped.
Right? That's true. That's true. Yeah. Well, I mean, we've had a pretty good conversation about this with all these things in mind.
Yeah.
Does the episode still hold up?
Oh, man.
With all these questions?
It's like you've listened to Mission Log. It's like you know the next segment is coming up.
Cake only comes in one flavor aboard Voyager, and that flavor is blue.
John. So what do you think? Does the episode hold up?
Man, there's so much here. And by the way, I mean, I know that you've listened to Mission Log before, and this question is always just like purposely vague. Because maybe in one way it holds up for you, maybe in another way it doesn't hold up. And that's okay. That's perfectly fine. Yeah. I feel like this episode is about it's like a 9.5 out of 10. Because they really have everything going for them. You've got the strength of your actors. You've got such meaty topics, and I really appreciate how you moved the transition from the medical ethics part of it to this sort of existential question, like who is the doctor and what are these things that make him who he is? And I think that's really the heart of what we've got here. And Star Trek in general can explore those ideas really well. I'm going to take off a little bit of a full point there because I don't think we quite landed where we needed to. Right. You know, it's like you said, we just needed one more scene or one more act or something to just squeeze a little bit more out of Janeway. I think she's wonderful in this, but I want one of two things. I want a little stronger empathy from her after that final conversation with Seven, or I want a little more follow-up from her after this final bit with the doctor to just show that, okay, she actually does have a heart here. And she actually does understand what's at stake here. You know, that's... Or we just go back to our rewrite and we say, you know what, Seven needs to be in the room. You know?
Yeah, you know, that's why I'm really interested in to see if, you know, you guys might have the original draft in your archives, because I'm kind of curious what if.
I'm going to dig around as soon as we're finished recording. I'm going to go into that other room and take a look.
Nice.
I think it's this is such a great concept, and we really use the uniqueness of the Doctor here well. You know, it's one thing to just say, look, we have this kind of magical character, but then we actually get to dig into what makes him tick. That makes it really strong. And I talk a lot on Mission Log about replay value because obviously we watch things over and over again before we prep a conversation like this. And there are cool twists in the story. That's great. But then what I like is going back to Rewatch and seeing how are these characters responding. Like, think about that scene in the conference room. The Doctor is there. He's saying what happened. He's outraged, right? And then Janeway and Tuvok just have this look. And the first time around, you go, okay, well, they're just looking at you because something weird happened, and there's this alien we don't know anything about. You watch it again, and you go, oh, no. They're looking at each other because they know exactly what happened. And now they're worried they have to...
You know, I don't think I even picked up on that this 20th time I've seen it. I don't think I even looked at that.
It's a really strong moment, you know? Yeah. So it's fun on the first viewing. It really holds up with these terrific moments when you rewatch it. Again, I think my only complaint here is just that final scene. And look, Brandon, this is not a slight against you because you've written some terrific Star Trek. But yeah, I think we need to see that original Joe Menosky written scene because then maybe that gave it the final emotional punch. What about you? Does this episode hold up for you?
You know, there's a part of me that judges this episode based on what we know about computing and technology today.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
You know? And like there's I think we're getting to a point with Star Trek, especially 90s Star Trek, where we're going to be looking at it the way we look at 1920s sci-fi and go, look at them thinking about those crazy things back then.
Right.
And we're getting there with Star Trek, and it's I'm not that old, damn it. So I refuse to think that way. But yeah, we got holo capture technology that's now here in 2024. You know, we have these special cameras on our iPhone 15s that we can then throw on a VR headset and relive our moments.
Crazy.
But you know, thematically and more, you know, from a morality play perspective, the episode asks, "Who am I?" and what makes me me.
Yeah. Well, okay, that's
and what gives me autonomy.
Yeah, and that right there, that's sort of the perfect transition over to morals, meanings, messages, of which I think there are a lot. And you and I, as the two of us, we can only kind of scratch the surface on that. So I look forward to what our listeners have to say, because this is deep, this is thoughtful. And, we deal with questions about the truth. Better to tell the truth, live with that truth, and live with the consequences, or persist in a lie if it's more convenient. But convenient for whom? Convenient for, in this case, Janeway's perception of what the crew needs versus the needs of a valued crew member. How many of the needs of the many may outweigh the needs of the few or the one here, especially if it means tampering with what makes that one. So I pretty much will always say, okay, you need to lean toward the truth. Whatever that truth is, no matter how hurtful it may be, it's the only way to truly move along and understand. So were there other options here? They explored a few, but then they had to keep getting more creative and eventually realize, like, oh no, we have to treat the Doctor like a person. And that's how we need to treat anyone dealing with trauma. They finally get to the word, Janeway especially, hopefully, finally gets to that point. And it's Seven who says, wait, is it Seven? No. We allowed him to evolve, and at the first sign of trouble, we gave him, first sign of trouble, boom, that's Janeway saying, without finishing the sentence, we pulled the plug, essentially.
Right.
Then she says, we gave him a soul. Do we have the right to take that away from him? So she asked her this question. And so, okay, maybe it's debatable what a quote-unquote soul is, because that's what B'Elanna points out in her response to Janeway. But you brought it up before, and let me point us right back to the measure of a man. It's not about how that other being compares to others. It's about who we are and the way that we choose to treat them. So the measure is us. The measure is about our ability to see others as people who deserve our understanding and our respect and our humanity. What about you?
I think this episode, at first watch, like I said, you're going to pull a particular theme that speaks to you. Maybe that's about individuality, what makes us human, what rights we have to our own autonomy. And then as the years pass, you're still going to see that same perspective, but you're going to pick up on a new one, on this 20th time rewatching it. You may have a conversation, you may be watching it with somebody who shares their different perspective. Yeah, that's the message for me in this episode, right? Is you brought up the soul, right? Mm-hmm. Futurists and technologists are already talking about, and by 2045 we'll be living in the cloud, yada yada yada. Yeah. And yet, do we know what makes us us? Can I so easily transfer what's in my mind from holodeck, from the medical bay to the holodeck,
right,
without feeling disconnected in some way, shape, or form? And I think this episode asks that question really well in a different perspective. Yeah. It's that feeling of, that sensation of, I don't want to remember this anymore. I want to block out that memory, like Jim Carrey in Eternal Sunshine. Yeah. But does that make you less of who you are? Does that take something away from you? And I think that's the question that we should be asking, or for me at least, that's the question I'm asking myself on this rewatch.
Yeah, excellent. Mission Log is produced by Roddenberry Entertainment. If you'd like to support us directly, you can do so at patreon.com/missionlog for early access to shows and the Mission Log Discord. Our website is missionlogpodcast.com, and for more Star Trek news and discussion, visit trekmovie.com.
On the next Mission Log, Bride of Chaotica!
Some of the music for Mission Log provided by Warp 11, online at warp11.com. Special thanks to consulting producers, Matt Esposito, Homer Frizzell, Julie Miller, Mike Richards, Mike Shadable, Paul Shadwell, and David Takechi. We can tell ourselves that the holo imager is huge because it's packed with awesome future tech. Or we can remember that the form factor of digital cameras in 1999 was a giant brick that saved photos to floppy disks. It's like a snapshot in time. End transmission.
Bravo. That is
I could
amazing.
I could do it much more calm.
This is a Roddenberry podcast. For more great podcasts, visit podcast.roddenberry.com.